Today on Veteran Stand Up, I'm talking with Kelly Barner about procurement. I started Veteran Stand Up more than a year ago to talk about ideas that improve veterans' economic opportunities. And clearly, for veteran business, selling to other businesses is one such opportunity. Kelly is the head of content and operations at Art of Procurement. She's a 20-year procurement and supply professional who's worked as a practitioner and as a consultant, and she's one of the most prolific writers and podcasters in her field. So welcome, Kelly. Let's talk about, businesses purchase a lot of stuff. Are there opportunities for veterans? Should they be paying attention to businesses?
Hi, Paul. Thank you so much for having me. And the answer is yes, of course. There are enormous opportunities for veteran-owned businesses and entrepreneurs to connect with large businesses. A couple of things, though, that people might not know. One is that, ironically, it's not enough to be a veteran-owned business. You have to actually be certified. There are a couple of organizations out there that will go through your finances, talk to you about your service record, and give you that certification. The second piece of advice I would give is reach out and proactively make sure that any companies you're currently working with know that you have that certification. Believe it or not, of the companies that have supplier diversity programs, and this is actually according to the 2022 State of Supplier Diversity Report, 85% of them actively track the spend that they have with veteran-owned businesses. But again, to count in that, you have to be certified. And then the third tip, this is something I'm going to go into a little bit of procurement speak here. We call this tier 2. So if you think about the supply chain, and I'm a company, if I buy from you, Paul, you're tier 1. And if I buy from your friend Mary, if you buy from your friend Mary, she's tier 2. That's something that veteran-owned businesses can do as well, because it's a huge program trying to expand into the supply chain economic impact. So you can work both up and down as a certified veteran-owned business. You can communicate to your customers and prospects that you're veteran-owned and that you have the certification. And then you can make careful choices about who you spend money with and then report that all up as well. So you can actually be working in two directions to help yourself and do a lot of good at the same time.
Well, that's really interesting to know. Now, you mentioned something I want to push a little further on, supplier diversity. Tell us more about what that is.
Yes. So a lot of companies, both business to consumer and business to business, want to be good members of the community. And so they will go out of their way to deliberately spend a certain amount of money with minority-owned, woman-owned, veteran-owned, disabled-owned, LGBTQ plus owned businesses. And they track all of that. These programs tend to be very large. They often have one or more people actually dedicated to running them. And they usually sit within the procurement function of the company, which is why it's become part of my expertise over time. These programs are very high visibility, but fortunately, and people may have heard of the ESG movement, that's environmental, social, and governance. There's actually two letters in there that are very important to veteran-owned businesses. One is the S, that's for social impact. So that's where working with what are considered under-leveraged communities to do business, and veteran-owned businesses are one of those. And the other one is the G for governance. So companies are accountable. They have to prove that they've spent this money. They have to prove that the businesses they spend the money with legitimately are members of those communities. And then they report on all of that to shareholders, stakeholders, VCs. So it's actually a very important, high profile and growing movement.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't tap on your expertise because of personal things going on in my life. Tell me about the baby formula shortage. I know this is a little, but you're a procurement person. What's going on?
So this is absolutely fascinating. I would actually liken this to the great toilet paper crisis of 2020. It was sort of the moment that everybody in the world stopped and noticed the supply chains that make their lives possible. So super quick recap. There was an enormous baby formula shortage, which is not actually over. In-stock rates have improved substantially since the peak last summer. But there were a couple of different things that happened. One was unfortunately producer related. Abbott owns a company that makes most of the baby formula, and they had a factory in Sturgis, Michigan that did not pass FDA inspection. So they both had to recall a ton of product, and they also had to stop producing until that factory could reopen. Now, the reason that had such an impact and this gets us to our second cause, is that 60% of the baby formula bought in the entire United States runs through the WIC program. That's the federally funded Women, Infants, and Children Sustenance Program. And the way the contracts are awarded is on a state-by-state basis. So I'm based in Boston, Massachusetts. 100% of the baby formula for the state of Massachusetts would go to one supplier. And what that led to is, over the course of the country, almost 90% of all baby formula was produced by just 3 companies. And so the market was horribly over concentrated. So when you had the number one supplier go down for an indefinite period of time, there wasn't enough fragmentation in the supply chain, in the market itself, to pick up that slack. And that's where you actually had the US change regulations to start importing baby formula from other countries, because regulatorily that had to be approved. Now, interestingly, they did not change the one thing that probably would have had the biggest impact, and that's allowing states to divide their demand and volume among multiple suppliers. That's creating a single point of failure. And like I said, the struggle continues, especially in those specialist formula UPCs.
Well, there's so much to learn. How can a listener or viewer follow you and learn more about what you're just talking about?
So the easiest way to find me and follow me is LinkedIn. I'll just say I'm addicted. I'm there all the time. I'm there mobile. I'm there desktop. I have a newsletter you could subscribe to. You can follow me. Or actually, one step further than that, I would love for you to drop me a note, mention that you saw this episode of Veteran Stand Up, and actually ask me to connect. I'm always happy to meet new people.
Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you, Paul.